Okay. Welcome, everybody. I call this meeting of the Magnolia Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. So if everybody please stand, Dr. Moffitt's going to lead us in our invocation and pledge.
If you'd like to join me in prayer, you're welcome to. Father, thank you so much for your love and your grace that we don't deserve, and just thank you that our hope is ultimately in you and not institutions, and we just freely admit that we're just human beings, and we just need your help and your wisdom to make choices for the district and for the taxpayers that would honor you and honor our community. We just thank you so much for the men and women that protect our cities and our police officers and then our military that protect our country. We just pray for our country the next couple of months that we would learn to disagree with each other in civil ways and just pray that your will would be done. And we just ask you all these things in your precious holy name. Amen. Amen. Say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Hinkleman, I noticed we've got a few here. Are there any others signed up to speak?
That's it, just those three, sir.
Okay, perfect. All right, before we get to that, I'm going to read a statement that we always read before these things. Participants must have turned in a request form 15 minutes prior to the start of this meeting. Participation is limited to 3 minutes. Any complaint or charge brought against any employee by name opposition for which resolution has not been sought in accordance with policy should be pursued through the district's grievance policy. Please note that the Board of Trustees shall not deliberate, respond, or make decisions regarding any subject that is not included on the agenda that is posted. So with that, this is our opportunity to listen, one of the opportunities we have to listen to people in the community. So and it's a good one. So with that, we're going to have our first one, and it's Mr. Craig Cosman.
All right, I'm here. Sorry, I've never done this before, so let's go to the mic.
Absolutely. Come on up to the front.
All right, thank you very much. So I was wanting to talk about the virtual school policy. I'd sent an email to Dr. Stevens, I don't know if you remember that, but basically that's what I was coming to talk about, that with virtual school, students not receiving class rank or weighted GPA. And that affects, me personally. My daughter's a freshman student at Magnolia High School, and my wife is an at-risk person. She's in the 4th year of a cancer battle, and we just don't take any risk with her health with COVID. So we've kept our daughter home, and I was kind of surprised to see that decision. Obviously, it's one that I disagree with, not just for myself, but for the 300 plus other virtual school students. And I was really just wanting to start a conversation on that to understand how you came to that decision. If you kind of thought about that, if, hurt people like myself, like my daughter, who is now going to go, without a class rank, really just basically to protect my wife. If that's something you guys thought about, and I'm hoping that maybe you would reconsider that. And that's my comments there. I don't know if you have any questions of me, but that's all I got to say.
Sure, thank you. I mean, it's not, like I mentioned beforehand, part of our game rules is that we're not to comment on it, but believe you me, our ears are working really well.
Okay. All right.
So we hear everything and want to hear everything anybody has to share with us and consider it. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, our next one is Ms. Ginger Russell.
How are y'all doing tonight?
Good, thank you.
A few years ago, I came before this board hoping to inform you of the Marxist agenda of the United Nations International Baccalaureate Program. International Baccalaureate is an arm of the United Nations 2030 indoctrination of our children into global citizens, social justice, intercultural understanding, and respect. Submission to one world socialist government using American taxpayers' dollars. IB programs are devoted to the radical transformation of America's classrooms, and unfortunately most parents have no idea what it is. My hopes that you would heed my warnings and do your due diligence. President Trump in 2017 pulled the United States out of the UNESCO, which this program is a nonprofit of. Despite this, the board has made an unfortunate decision and has continued to use this program, placing IB World School logos on our 2 American high schools, that they're world schools. Where and when did we lose our love for our country and promote globalization? The results of Marxist teaching, which has infiltrated our nation's education systems with programs like IB, project-based learning, social-emotional learning, Common Core, and C-Scope, we see the results of this played out on our streets across our country today. The self-proclaimed Marxist group Black Lives Matter and Antifa have taken to the streets looting, killing, and demanding whites bow to their evil social justice agenda. Social justice will destroy any and everything it touches. NASCAR, football, baseball, basketball, our churches. I found our local ISD English IB program had a book for the kids to read by James Baldwin, and I'm just going to read a few excerpts from it. Power was the subject of the speeches I heard. We were offered, as Nation of Islam doctrine, historical and divine proof that all white people are cursed and are devils and are about to be brought down. This has been revealed by Allah himself to his prophet, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The white man's rule will be ended forever in 10 or 15 years, and it must be conceded that all present signs would seem to bear witness to the accuracy of the prophet's statement. The so-called American Negro is the only reason Allah has permitted the United States to endure so long. The white man's time is up in 1913, but it is the will of Allah that has lost this black nation, and black men of this country be redeemed from their white masters and return to their true faith, which is Islam. The Negroes of this country may never be able to rise to power, but they are well placed indeed to precipitate chaos and ring down the curtain on the American dream. This is heartbreaking for me.
Ms. Russell, your time is up.
Anyway, I know y'all don't think I know what I'm talking about, but I have read Goals 2000, Credential to Destroy, and Why Education Became a Weapon,
Ms.
and the
Russell, your
deliberate
time is
coming
up.
down of America. Y'all need to get out of this program.
Okay, then our next speaker is Mr. Calvin Russell.
I hope you guys are doing okay tonight. I come to talk to you about the new tax rate that you guys proposed. And I have a graphic that Magnolia ISD put out. And boy, it sure looked like good news when you just looked at that graphic. It says that tax rate decrease of 3.5 pennies. You know, I would assume that most of you guys on the board probably finished high school. I wouldn't even be surprised if some of you even took a college course or two. But to tell people that, you know, the good news is that we're decreasing your taxes or the tax rate, you guys know that that does not mean that it's a tax decrease. The only reason the tax rate went down is because the property values blew up. And so what happened is, and thankfully, MCAT provides documentation for that to tell us what the no new revenue tax rate would have been. The no new revenue tax rate, which is the rate that you could charge or you could adopt that would have brought you the exact same amount of money that you got the previous year with the amount of the aggregate property value amount that MCAT is using that you guys, or that the school district, everyone, that gets to tax it on. So the no new tax rate was 1.2309. I guess you guys are probably aware of that. The tax rate that you guys adopted, unless I'm mistaken, and please tell me if I am, 1.2744. Well, instead of that being a 3.5 cent decrease, it really is a 3.5 cent increase over the taxes that we paid last school year. And again, the reason that is because our property values have gone up. And for you guys, I would like to propose in the future, whenever you're adopting a tax rate, rather than just playing with the rates or using those as your advertising what you're doing, give them the real story. Give them the amount of money that the tax is going to be the tax burden to the people in Montgomery County, not just the rate, because the rate doesn't tell the whole story. So that's what I got. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you for your time on that. Our next item on our agenda is the superintendent's report. So Dr. Todd, you're up.
How are y'all doing?
Good.
Good.
Well, we have started students in our building full-time last week, and it was, I heard so many great reports from our teachers and our principals that it felt so good to have kids, I mean, all day long, all those kids back in our buildings. And again, I just want to brag on the principals and the teachers and on these administrators here that worked so hard to make sure we were able to do that. And it really went off without too much of it, although it was strange. It seemed like it was the first day we had, since we had kids rolling in those groups. And if we had any sort of, I guess, hiccup in that, it was that on that Tuesday, the first day we were back, I think at Magnolia Intermediate School, there were several kids that got on the bus that they had been normally boarding and leaving, the bus number, and those buses had changed. So that first day, we had some slow buses, some kids getting home, way beyond what we normally would. And the second day, they recovered from that real quick, and things have been running a lot smoother now. So I did want to kind of touch base and give you a little bit of information about our enrollment, which I think where we are right now is probably good news, in that we do have still about 2,000 kids or so that are participating online in our asynchronous program, and Dr. Garza is going to talk to us about that tonight. One of the things we need to do is approve this plan for TEA of how we are teaching our kids online and part of that. But last year, and the board's aware that October Snapshot is a pretty important date for us in kind of benchmarking the number of kids we have. Last year, for October the 25th, our benchmark number was 13,182 kids. So September the 9th, enrolled, we had 12,987 kids. That's 197 kids less than last year's snapshot. And usually starting September, our numbers continually creep up to that benchmark part. So considering all the things we're going through right now and the fact we're just that far short, we really feel like that's a good, strong number. Kids are back in school. The other part of that story is almost all of our secondaries have elevated numbers. I mean, we've got more kids in those buildings now than we did at Snapshot last year. Where we seem to have somewhat of a deficit is in our elementary schools. Those are the numbers where we're starting to chase some of those kids that somehow have not re-enrolled. That means they are not either showing up for us and to our building, or they're not logging in to Canvas and participating online. So I think it's really good news. We're continuing to chase those numbers and try to call parents and find out where they are. I know the campuses are involved in that. The last couple of weeks we had the entire staff of our DAEP dedicated to kind of tracking down some of the online people to make sure they knew we were back in session and find out where they were. And so we think that number will continue to go up as we begin to progress. Again, I want to thank, because we are actually standing up and running 2 separate programs. We're running our programs for our kids that are in our buildings, and our teachers are doing that job that they normally always do, which is a yeoman's task of taking care of our kids in our classroom. But we also have a separate group that are managing our asynchronous online learning potential with our kids K through 12. And that's not what we normally do. It's a learning curve for us in navigating the online part of that. We really feel like our craft and what we do is best handled in front of kids, our teacher and students in the same place. And so it has been a learning curve for us to project our craft into an online version, but we're continuing to work on it. You know, I tried to make a pledge to a lot of our teachers, and sometimes I get in trouble when I get out on a limb like that we were going to separate as much as possible, and we would have those who took care of the online learning part of the house, and we would have the other teachers that would take care of the classroom part, and we weren't going to ask people to do double duty. And unfortunately, we have some teachers right now that are having to manage both sides of that, and I want to tell you, it is tough. It is hard on some of those teachers, and I've talked to Dr. Garza and their staff to say that, you know, I want to know the total number of those people involved in it. I think we need to have some discussions that if they continue doing that, and I think that is above and beyond the call of duty, we need to look at somehow financially taking care of some of those teachers that are having to balance both sides of it. I know there are parts of what we do, particularly in our secondary, in our advanced classes. I mean, there's no one else that probably can fulfill some of those duties. Those teachers have got to handle both of that. We've got some situations now where we have a few kids that have been quarantined, and we're going to have those kids move into online. And that may mean that some of their regular teachers are going to have to pick up some of that duty. And so we're going to have to figure out how we take care of our teachers who are sort of burning the candle at both ends on this teaching in classes, regular classes, and in online part of the sections. But other than that, I think we've had a great start. Looking forward to the rest of this week, moving through it. And I also have a invitation to our board as we move back toward the state of normalcy in Magnolia ISD. But this Friday, Saturday is our annual ag show in Magnolia, and we're going to have an ag show. We had several different options. Dr. Campbell has worked with that crew to figure out what that's going to look like. They had about 3 different scenarios depending upon what the state of the world was at that time. And so this right now, I think they're just on phase 1 of that, which is going to look very, very normal. We're going to social distance. We'll be wearing masks when appropriate. There won't be stands, but we'll have buyers that'll be there, and we're gonna have a livestock sale. We're gonna have a buyer's dinner, and so you guys are invited. And on Saturday, the buyer's dinner starts at 4:30. So then you want to come out and be a part of that. I'm gonna be over there supporting those kids, and we're gonna sell some pigs and chickens and hogs and have a good time over there. So we've got. The first week, I think, we got a football scrimmage. We got some volleyball games that are not too long down the road here. And so it's going to be exciting to kind of keep moving back into what school has looked like. So that's as much as I'm going to report tonight.
That's good stuff. Do you happen to know, out of the 13,000 odd students, what percent are on campus versus online? Off the top of your head?
Well, I think it's somewhere like 80-20. Is that about the number we know? Something like that?
The number on the sheet.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I would also echo what you're saying about all the teachers. I mean, had to delay for a couple of weeks, so everybody was online, and now we're, 80% in school, 20% online. I mean, these guys are, their poor heads are on a swivel the whole time.
Well, they heard loud and clear, I think I put it in writing, that we were gonna do our best to keep them from having to do both. And so I want them to also maybe hear that as a board, we're talking about, we know how tough assignment that is, and if we need to figure out some way to reward them some way financially, we need to explore that. Because we don't know if there's a way to get some of them out of doing, there's only so many of them. And so, I know Dr. Garza is working on some of those numbers for me, and we'll explore that, and I may bring some possibilities back to y'all to take care of some of those
Sure,
people that are busy.
Absolutely.
I haven't consulted Dr. Morris in that, but,
Find the money, I'm sure.
we'll find some money somewhere.
That hat.
That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. All right, if there's not any more comments on that, we'll move on to our consent agenda. This portion of the agenda consists of items to be routine and enacted by one motion unless separate discussion is requested. So is there separate discussion requested? Everybody read everything? We're good? All righty, so we need a motion that we approve consent agenda items 6A through D. Motion by Joe, seconded by Chuck. All in favor? That motion passes. Thank you. So now we'll go to our considered agenda, and Dr. Garza is up on deck.
All right, well, good evening.
Dr. Garza, you need to turn your mic on.
You're out of time, sir.
Need help?
Is there an on button over there somewhere?
Yes, here, I'll help.
A good board secretary.
There you go.
All right, good evening. It's a little smaller on this, all guys have problems, I'm shooting away to the mic issue. Okay, so I stood before y'all a couple months ago and talked to y'all about our virtual school option that we have for our students this year. And so then we had that meeting, and then I think the same meeting, we said we're gonna delay the start for 4 weeks, and so everybody's gonna get virtual. And so that kind of threw a few kinks into our plans this year, but some things we definitely overcame. And now that we're in kind of week 2 of our separation of lanes, the dust is kind of settling, and now we can kind of get into like a normal routine. So, TA requires us to detail to them how we're going to educate our distance learners. And so one of the things we have to do is we have to submit a plan, and it's in your board packet, I believe it's 22 pages. I'm sure you all read it. It's a great read, by the way. And we had to overcome, and we had to implement a couple of things within that plan very, very soon. So the first thing we had to do is we had to submit a letter of intent. I did that back in July. And then now we have to submit this plan by October 1st. And that date's important because TA will get our plan, we're actually going to grade it using a rubric, and then will give us back any kind of feedback. And then if we have to go back and alter it, we have to have it approved by the board and by them by the end of December. If not, there are some funding implications on our end. So it's important. We looked at all the exemplars at the rubric. We're very confident that our plan meets those things and is above and beyond what's being asked to do. So there are 4 components of the plan. Like I said, most of the stuff I went over back in July, so I will kind of hit a broad level here. But there's an instructional schedule. They want to know what kind of materials that we're going to use for our students. They want to know how we're going to gauge student progress. And then the last one, implementation, deals with more how we're going to train our teachers and how we're going to communicate to our staff, to our community, this whole new world of virtual instruction. So in your packets, you have a staple instructional schedule that for secondary and elementary is the same one I showed to y'all back in July. That has not changed. But in each area, TA has some questions that we have to answer. And so in this first area, there are 4, and they all deal with kind of expectations for student interactions with the content and student interactions between staff with the teachers. And so our philosophy on this is that we have the same expectations for students in virtual school that we do in face-to-face school. So the same idea that kids come to school every day, they're expected to do work. In virtual school, they're expected to log on, go to school, and they're expected to also do work. And so that hasn't changed. What we have to do and be kind of cognizant of on our end is to make sure that the lessons that are being delivered in the virtual school line up content-wise with what's being delivered face-to-face. In that, so that way, whenever kids do come back to school, hopefully they will, at the end of the 9 weeks, they don't miss any kind of beat academically speaking. right? We expect teachers and students to be interacting weekly, but whenever that really comes down to it, most of them are interacting several times a week. And we're really working with our teachers this year about how to use data from what the kids are turning in to alter their instruction, right? So it's the same concept as whenever kids are in school, they submit an assignment, and we give them feedback as to that assignment, go fix this, that concept. It's the exact same concept. So our plan outlines each of those areas in terms of that. So that is the first section. The second section was fairly simple for the materials part, because all our materials that we have, the vast majority are already available online, which is good. So y'all have students in the district, they log into ClassLink, and when they log in, ClassLink, there's a big, beautiful dashboard full of all these links: online textbook, Canvas, Imagine Learning, and so forth, things like that, right? And we've been doing that for years. So that, for our students, is not a new concept, whatever, whatsoever. But what is new for us this year is that we have any kind of student that is special education, English language learner, or 504, that kind of stuff. We have to make sure that that the paperwork they have on file with us matches what we can do virtually, because there's just some things and some modifications, so to speak, that we can't do online. So every paperwork that we have is currently being reviewed to make sure that those accommodations can be met virtually, and if not, we're giving kind of substitute things for them to do. So that's one change on our end. As far as materials, all of our stuff is available online, and that's been fairly simple for us to accommodate so far. The third part is student progress, and this part deals mainly with how are we gauging student engagement in the virtual classroom. And that last question is probably the most important one on there, is how are we gauging student progress? So the first one is just engagement, is how are we looking at how are the kids engaging the material on a daily basis? Are they on the live Zooms for synchronous instruction? Are they doing their activities? Are they emailing teachers? Are they going to virtual office hours? Those are all ways that they can be engaged. But the last one is how are they doing while they're engaged? And so that's the big thing that TEA really puts this year on us, is how are we tracking academic progress? And what's beautiful about Canvas, which is our system for grades 2 through 12, and now we have Seesaw for grades pre-K through 1, is that both these systems actually can give us that information about what kids are clicking on, what pages they're viewing, what they're turning in, how often, timestamp, all that kind of stuff. And it also allows us to communicate with the kids through that system. And so the teachers can give actually audible feedback to kids. So I know for Seesaw, for example, you can turn a lesson for the sight words, and teachers can actually record their feedback right to you, and you can press play on your iPad and it plays right to you. It's awesome. So we can actually give audible feedback virtually without even being live, and that's been very, very nice for our teachers so far. So that is the third one, and the last one deals with our implementation in terms of PD for our teachers and how we're going to communicate all this brave new world to our community. And I think an area that we've done exceptionally well this year, very proud of this, is our PD plan for our staff. So Dr. Stevens came in last year in May, so we got to get ready for this coming school year. And so we had all of our teachers that were returning for this school year get Canvas trained back in May when we had some downtime during the school shutdown. So we completed all of that back in the spring. Teachers did some additional training this summer in terms of more Canvas, kind of laying the groundwork for this year. And then when they came back in August, then they started getting more online training through their content. So if you're an English teacher, you're going to English training with English content, but here's some online tools for that English training. So we did all that throughout the summer and August. And then probably the best investment we made is we have actually built out an IT department. So we actually have 2 technologists that work with one works elementary and one secondary. And they are on campuses every day, and they're meeting with teachers, helping them on how to navigate Canvas, how to navigate Seesaw, all these tools. And there are a ton of tools out there, by the way, for teachers, and trying to make it all make sense to them. And so that's really, really been very helpful to our teachers. If we didn't have them, we would be in a very bad position, I'll say that. So they've been very, very helpful. They have their own kind of scope and sequence of things that they're working with teachers throughout the year. So every few weeks, they'll approach a new topic with teachers. How to make a test, how to make a quiz in Canvas. Here's Edpuzzle, here's how to use this. Here's all these different tools. So they're doing that throughout the year, very, very busy. And then the last part of that is how our PD experiences develop educator content when it comes to analyzing data. So we do a lot of data analysis just to begin with, but now we really have to look at the work that's being submitted from students, and then what are we doing with that information? You know, so a kid turns something in, they do poorly on it, then we have to give feedback. Because here's why you didn't do well on this, and go back and fix this. Otherwise, the kid will just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And what complicates that is that we don't see them every day. All right, so a issue that a teacher can fix face to face on Tuesday, we may not see them again virtually until Thursday. And so these things kind of compound. So it's how does that feedback look to the kid in real time? So that's one area we have to keep working on with our staff in terms of our professional development. And the last part, it talks about communication and support. Obviously, Denise does a fantastic job in our district communications. Our campuses are doing really well this year in terms of communicating with SMORES and School Messenger about changes in the online program and face-to-face program. All that's going exceptionally well. Way back in July, I presented some of the expectations that we have for our parents. And there's just some basics that they have to do to make sure kids have a quiet place to work, not doing the work for them, make sure that they're working independently, make sure that the kids have time to do the work, knowing that parents work, we have to be flexible with our schedule a little bit. So all that has been communicated via the website. And then the last and probably most important part of this is how are we supporting parents with technology? And so our district has bought about 8,000 devices since June, I believe. And we have about 1,850 that have already arrived. And like everywhere else in the world, they're ordering Chromebooks, and so there's been a little bit of a delay. But we have about 4,500 hopefully coming in the next few weeks, with some trickling in the rest of the semester. So we will almost double our inventory of Chromebooks and tablets during this semester. And so that in itself will allow us to have every kid that needs a device will have one, and allow us to have devices in the classroom for our teachers to use for kids that do not bring one. So that's been a major investment. Dr. Stevens, Dr. Morris did a great job with that as far as giving us those tools to be successful. But we're looking forward to having everybody have that available at all times. And lastly, we've also, all of our training videos for parents and about Canvas and Seesaw in English and Spanish. And that appears to be going well because the parent phone calls, emails about that have gone way down since school started. So all that's kind of going quite well in terms of just the whole plan. Like I said earlier, our numbers in terms of our online is about 20%, which is a pretty good number. However, when you get to the high school level, is where it starts causing the problems with teachers. So 20% might be 125 kids per grade level, but you might have one kid taking AP stats that's online now. And so when that happens for that teacher, it kind of creates a class within a class, and that's kind of what we referred to earlier, and that becomes very challenging for our high school teachers in particular. So those are some things that we're having to overcome, and the whole caveat on all this is that parents can choose every 9 weeks, and so in the next 3 weeks, they can change their minds all over again, and we have a whole new set of kids. And so hopefully that's not the case. That would cause little numbers problems. But our system's kind of there with this plan so that we can kind of support all those different changes. So a lot of information in the last 10 minutes, I get that. What questions do y'all have for me in terms of our asynchronous plan?
I just want to comment on the paper packets. I know that it come up due to technology, and not every kid has access to the internet or their parents able to bring them to, I know our churches have opened up and other buildings. So I think that's part is great that we're able to do that. I guess my question is, do we, and I don't know how many of those are actually, requesting that, do we try to follow up and keep track of that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and figure out the why.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so we have, so on the packet deal, for attendance purposes, we actually have to take the packets, have them turn in every week, give them new packets, and that's how we kind of take attendance for the students. But for our parents that don't have resources, Denise has the information on the web, talks about different resources available for families. We also have our school available after school that they come up to, that they can use if they so choose. I think they're open from 2:30 to 5:30, I believe. So there's available, there's churches available, and parking lots are always available, all that kind of stuff. It does become challenging whenever parents don't enter the building and all that, so it's tough when you're a virtual student, or you're not virtual. Very challenging, yes, sir.
I guess there are different mindsets of how you could look at what we're doing, and I know as I talk to other superintendents and districts around the state, there's some people, obviously we're just trying to get through this, and this isn't what we do, and it's very difficult, and, or the deal of, look, this is a service, this is maybe part of the new norm of where we're gonna be for a while. And I think that's the position we're trying to take. It is difficult for us. It is new territory, but we're doing everything we can to make it as user-friendly for our kids and our teachers so that learning continue to go on there, because I don't know, any of us know for certain how long this may be a model we're getting for, obviously for this year, and it may be part of a new, or may go on for another year or so. We don't know. So we just need to be good at it. And that means that we constantly have to be looking and evolving. It may mean we're gonna have to shift around and add some additional staffing to handle some of the duties that are being there. But again, I just wanna commend this group for what we've been able to do in a short amount of time where we are. It's not perfect, and we're the first ones to stand up and say it's not perfect, but I think it gets better as we go. But anyway, this is part of the drill, is we have to turn this plan in, and they've been working on this for a while, and yeah, that's a mouthful to say for a while.
Kind of following up to what Chuck asked, do we know how many of those kids that we think don't have the resources to adequately participate?
It's not a firm number, but I've heard less than 10 in the entire district. So that's what we know of. But again, how many of those people are, how many of those students are not logging all that are kind of lost right now? That's the, you know, we always have no-shows every year that you have to go find. And I think some of that's going to be finding those no-shows, and that's going to be part of the process as well.
Okay.
So, it's not pervasive, but you know, one's not, right?
That's right. And I was gonna say, of course, as soon as we identify that student, then we're gonna do everything we can to enrich him, give him the proper technology, do what we need to do to make sure that he or she gets to participate.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's part of this, because, and I do think, as Dr. Gurr says, we're probably in a much better situation in Magnolia ISD than in a lot of places, as far as kids having internet connectivity, having devices at the house. But we do have kids that lack that, and we've got to figure out how we can be of service to them. And the state of Texas, as we talked the last board meeting, is doing things to help us find ways to push those kind of things out for the kids. And so we're continuing to investigate and figure out how we can be of service to them. But it's a two-way. They have to also reach out to us about some of it, and sometimes they're not as willing to be forthcoming about some of those things to us. So we'll get there, though.
Yeah, our biggest concern, to answer your question, really is the students in that position are really the ones that are the biggest academic needs. So it's almost a double whammy. I mean, it's highly concerning that whenever kids are just off the grid,
Right.
that's highly concerning.
Do we have a feeling for about how many kids may have started with us and that at some point they've disappeared? Like they're not logging in and they're not attending classes? Do we know if that's like a handful of kids, or is there a larger number that's just may have started and they're either not attending or they're not logging in?
Now, we do have, the schools are working with those students that are not logging in and trying to keep them engaged. And so,
Okay.
I'll give you an example. We had about 15 at Fairbanks Junior High that the principal was personally calling parents and saying, hey, your student's not logging in,
Okay.
and the parents were unaware.
Okay.
and so they are now back face-to-face school.
Okay.
Right?
I can fix that.
And so there's a lot of that going on. There was
Okay.
lots of lane switching last week. I think a lot of the parents
Okay.
that wanted to stay home kind of saw what this was going to entail. And the solid safety measures back at the campus level and we're satisfied, and a lot of them have come back. And so, but when they do that, so remember, you know, those numbers, like the smaller those numbers get
Yeah.
virtual, the harder it is to staff.
Right.
Because you start burning staff on a very small number of kids and make sure the class is bigger. So that's the hard part of all this, is juggling all that. And the campuses are doing a really good job doing that. But you know, they're all staffed differently. They all have populations, different enrollment numbers. So it's hard to say here's the plan for each campus because they're all staffed differently.
Right.
So,
Well, and I'm happy to hear that we're trying to track down the kids that aren't logging in,
yes, ma'am.
because their parents may not know.
May not.
Yes, yeah, yes, ma'am.
They have to go to work.
Yeah. The parents are at work, and the parents may not know they're not logging in.
I can speak, I have a fifth grader,
Yeah.
and he was struggling with the online environment too.
Yeah.
I'll say
Yes.
that, so I was glad to see it, for sure.
So Brandon, is there a push to, when you look at synchronous versus asynchronous, asynchronous is not as much engagement with the student, it's harder on the teacher. I mean, there's all kinds of words with that aren't as bad with synchronous. We all along in school, right? But is there a push to try to get as many asynchronous into synchronous as you possibly can, so you can minimize the asynchronous thing going on?
Well, so that's kind of a fine line, because what we're hearing is that parents actually want more synchronous activities, especially at the upper levels, the high school levels. And so what we've asked is that our core classes have about 2 per week synchronous lessons, which, so on the student side, and I'm going to keep on the high school, that's my background, but they typically have about 2 synchronous lessons per day total. So if you have 7 classes and 2 out of 7, that's not asking a lot as far as synchronous activities. And I think on Fridays they might have 3. So that's not too bad. And then at the elementary level, they're running an hour and a half a day, probably live synchronous lessons. So it's roughly the same amount of time period. So there is a lot of asynchronous time, and teachers are doing things in small groups, with groups of 5 and that kind of stuff to kind of mitigate the whole group stuff, kind of get lost on like the Zoom gallery type thing. But yeah, so we're running hour and a half, 2 hours a day max. And then there's some days where there's no synchronous lessons, it's all asynchronous. It kind of depends where the teacher is, where that team per campus is. It's kind of hard to pinpoint that one per se.
But you're trying to get that as high as you can, right?
I think 2 lessons a week for a core class is about the minimum that I'd like to see, because anything less than that, and especially like for math classes, that's very independent. I think it's a special kind of learner.
Right.
Especially when you get those upper level math classes.
Right.
That is tough.
Because you don't get the student engagement going on, they're
Yes,
watching
sir.
it 8 at night or whatever they're doing.
Yes, sir.
You just-
Yeah. So it is a fine line. There's some parents that want more synchronous, and there's some that want less synchronous, and they just want the videos posted online. So that's why we're able to do that and kind of satisfy both masters, so to speak.
Huh.
So it's very challenging for the teachers right now. Lots of balls.
How are the little kids handling, that time, the kindergarten, we had any feedback from those kids?
Actually, that seems to be the group that's handling this the best. It's actually the elementary grade levels. Now, they have parents that are with them. It's the high school kids that are a little more independent, and the junior high kids are a little more independent, maybe parents not home. Those are the ones that we're more worried about as far as them being online today and really getting involved, because you must go get some instruction. You could be in a deep hole quickly.
Well, so one other question I thought of is trying to keep up with what other folks that might be doing things a little different or better. This is brand new. I mean, you start with a clean sheet of paper 6 months ago, right? But how do you sort of keep your ear to the ground as what others are doing, so you can get new ideas that might work a little better than what we have? But like you say, it's not perfect. It's not, nobody can say they are. But how can you best do that? That's tough.
So we talked to, Sarah's got a lot of contacts in Brazosport. I got some in Humble and Conroe and of course Montgomery as well, and just kind of see what they're doing. And we're hearing the same thing all across the Houston area. Teachers are highly frustrated with the attendance process, and it's hard. I mean, the TA is given 3 different ways to be present now, and then for a teacher, that's very challenging. And so that, and then just balancing all of the online and in person at the same time, that's tough. Now, what we've done to our credit is we've tried to minimize that and have more virtual teachers that just do that. But like I said earlier, in high school level, in some of these courses, the numbers weren't there. We just couldn't make it happen. So, we couldn't pull a kid out of calculus because they wanted to do virtual. That's not an option, right? So we had to teach that kids, and that one student creates one extra class for a teacher. So that happens all, AP stats, AP calculus, IP film, you name it. And so those teachers are really kind of bearing the brunt of that right now. For your English 1, Algebra 1, your basic classes, we have more virtual sections for that, and less below the teachers, but it's those singleton classes that really pose a problem for us. And that's around the Houston area. Now, some districts are just live zooming kids in the classrooms all day long, and that's their plan. But that in itself also is more work on teacher, because they're having to balance a camera with kids online, they have 5 kids online, and they classroom 25 at the same time. That's also a lot of work. So anyway you slice it, there's programs there for sure.
Right. That's
It
right.
just didn't.
It's a whole new world.
It works everywhere.
Yeah.
They didn't allow us to actually do the synchronous with our, was there a cutoff point? Couldn't happen below a certain grade level?
4 hours a day. Yeah. So, yes, sir. So pre-K, K, and 1, they would not fund a pure synchronous model. like TA won't do it because they think that those students cannot operate in a synchronous environment all day long. And even in the synchronous model, you have to have minimum 4 hours a day of live instruction on Zoom. And we thought that was just not an option for us. That's just way too demanding. It's a very rigid. This model has much more flexibility for parents and students.
Right. Challenging.
It's a lot.
To say the least.
Do you think there's a student who is doing the online learning, and then there's a student who's going to school, and let's say they go halfway through the school year. If that student who's doing the online learning decides he's gonna go into the classroom now, do you think he's roughly at the same spot at that
Should be.
point?
Yes, sir.
So he or she, you think, could make that transition?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And so that's what I was saying earlier. The teachers fall in the same scope and sequence that, so if you and I run a team, I might have virtual kids, you might have the face-to-face. We're planning together, we're doing lessons. The delivery's a little bit different because it's virtual and face-to-face. But, if you're covering slow down, you're one, I'm covering slow.
Okay.
The kids, the learning outcomes are the exact same. They're all going to be tested the same, all that kind of stuff. So none of that changes. We have to make sure our system is pretty tight so that when if they do switch plans after 9 weeks, semester, or even in March, they should be good to go.
Okay.
So the testing is the same, the assignments are the same, for the most part?
Content-wise, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, content,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah.
Content-wise, but they might be having different activities because they're virtual, but the content's the same. So if we're covering, the U.S. Revolution, we're covering the U.S. Revolution. And you might cover differently, but we're covering the same content, and the kids all have to know the same thing by the end of that unit. So it's a lot of looking at the teachers, for sure.
That's a big job.
Yes, sir. It is.
Are you finding, as far as communicating to parents whose kids are 100% online, is there ways that's better to communicate with those parents? Are you
I have
learning
not
that,
personally
anything
heard
new?
that, But not from the principal. Look, have you heard anything about that?
Anything new with that?
That's not come up as a potential issue.
Okay.
Yeah, now we'll need to, we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious.
But, no, most of the concerns last week were about one more synchronous activities, which kind of surprised me.
Right.
But there's one, in math.
Right.
Sure.
Math's a big one.
Math,
That
physics.
builds, But that was one that came up the most, was can we get more math, sessions available, more office hours, more tutoring, that kind of stuff. So.
All right. Any other questions?
Do we, one other question. I know we had 3 options for parents to choose.
Yes,
Do,
ma'am.
do we know if we've had many choose the 3rd option?
We have had a few, so I think, I want to say for MHS, for example, so there were
Right.
about 400 kids that chose online total, and I think of that, I think 150, if I remember correctly, don't quote me on that,
Okay.
is in that ballpark.
I was just
for-
trying to get the feeling.
For the option 3.
Okay.
So the option 3, so just to kind of reiterate that, was, so if you wanted to have your points, your weighted GPA points, you could do virtual classes, but you come up to school for your assessments after hours. We offer that as an option. And so some students chose that option, and some students did not.
So that was after school in a safe environment,
Yes, sir.
isolated, all
Yes,
those
sir.
kinds
They
of
also
stuff.
listening, they sign up for tests, yeah, it's very, it's very much like a very live environment, so it's as safe as we can make it.
That's good. Well, I'm glad to hear that some students chose to do that,
Yes.
because they needed to.
All right, anything else? All right, so we need a motion that we approve the MISD asynchronous plan as presented by Dr. Garza. Motion by Joe, seconded by Christie. All those in favor? That motion passes. Dr. Garza, thank you.
Sir.
That's right, thank you too, both of y'all for working on it. So.
Absolutely. We realize there's nothing easy about any of this. Every day's a new day.
Sonia, you could never do it with multiple kids still in school or
No.
check either, but
No.
if
not
you
with
turn
all 4
on
of them.
Canvas notifications for your kids' classes, the
Yes.
teachers are doing a fabulous job of communicating what's coming up and what your deadline is, and today you're face-to-face, Ruth, or you remember whatever, because I turned the notifications on, I was like, 118 emails. I'm like, oh, none of them are for me. So if a parent wants to monitor
Yes.
what their kid, should their kid be busier than they appear to be, they can figure that out by turning on notifications.
What else you got?
Well, at this point, it's a little different. In fact, I think it's the first time Mr. Brenner's been, we've given a lot of tours through the years to boards about it. It's the first time we've ever done one at the end of the board meeting, but I knew this was gonna be a fairly quick, you know, according to how long Dr. Garza took us through the asynchronous plan, but we'd have a little bit of time, but we're gonna run around and see a couple of, so we've been trying to go see some of these things for a while. You know, let's give a lot of credit where it's due, but Tim Bruner and Mr. Morris have, you know, found the dollars in some of that, and we still squeezed out some additional facility things that really weren't necessarily a part of our last bond, but we got some things done, and we're gonna go look at them. And it's our transportation center here on the west side, and some of the things, work we've done there. And also we're gonna look at Alpha and some of the redo we did. We told y'all about some of it, you know, we're gonna look at that. And so, won't be very long, we're not going very far, but we'll do a recess and head outside. We got a van ready to roll out there, and we'll go take a look at it.
Conducted during this tour. Members of the public in attendance at this meeting may meet the board members of the Transportation Department and Alpha Academy. Upon conclusion of the facility tour, the board will begin recess to travel from Alpha Academy and will reconvene in the board room. So thank you very much, appreciate you. Okay. We need a motion to adjourn this meeting. We're back. Motion by Chuck, seconded by Sonia. All in favor? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
All right.
We're done.